Henry Cavill has had one of the strangest trajectories in modern Hollywood. For years and years, he was typecast as the handsome but disposable supporting man, the almost guy who lost out on roles to bigger names. Yet over time, he's proven himself to be the exact opposite of that stereotype, an actor with an almost alarming amount of range. Cavill is the kind of performer who can move from Shakespearean gravitas to pulp action schlock without breaking stride. The irony nowadays is that his breadth is often overlooked because his looks are so commanding that people underestimate how versatile he truly is. He's built like a superhero, and he's also got the chops of a character actor. And when you start tracking the different roles he's taken, it becomes clear that Cavill might be one of the most adaptable leading men of his generation. Take the Tudors, his breakout role as Charles Brandon. Cavill, playing the best friend archetype, injected the role with enough nuance to make Brandon feel like the tragic counterweight to Jonathan Rhys-Meyers' Henry VIII. Cavill's performance oscillates between boyish loyalty and bitter cynicism, often in the same scene. He portrays Brandon as someone fully aware of the moral rot of the court, yet too entangled in power to step away. Then came Immortals, where Cavill had to step into the role of Theseus, a mythological hero usually reduced to a sword-swinging archetype. Instead of treating it as another muscular action showcase, Cavill infused the part with a sense of desperation and dignity. He wasn't playing Theseus as a godlike warrior, he was playing him as a human man thrust into circumstances far larger than himself. His body language carried the weight of someone constantly calculating whether he'd survive the next battle, but his eyes always betrayed the flicker of determination. It's a subtle layering of vulnerability within a role that usually invites flat heroism. And, of course, there's Man of Steel. Cavill's Superman is undeniably the most divisive version of the character in its history. For some, he's too brooding, too alien, not the hopeful Boy Scout they grew up with. But that misses the point. The issue lies mostly in what he was given to work with, because this was during Zack Snyder's tenure of the DCEU. With its dour setting, and with writing more romanticizing edginess in an attempt to come across as realistic, Cavill kind of has to play him as this immigrant from another world who feels the full burden of godlike responsibility. His Clark Kent is constantly balancing the aching desire to belong with the knowledge that he can never truly save everyone. That internal tension seeps through in his silences, his hesitations, and even in the weary way he delivers simple lines. Cavill doesn't just wear the cape. He redefines what it means to put it on in the first place. He embodies Superman with a kind of grounded weight that goes beyond the suit and the cape, its physical presence married to emotional restraint. He communicates so much through his body language before he even speaks. The sheer bulk and discipline he brought to the role serves as a layer of storytelling. His Clark Kent is a man hiding his true identity, a figure who has to wrestle with the cost of always standing apart. The camera lingers on his silhouette, the way he holds himself with a dignity in mundane scenes, and the effort he takes to appear less imposing in human settings. It reminds you that this is someone who can never fully blend in, even when he wants to. Cavill leans into subtle emotional beats. He doesn't oversell the iconic image of Superman. He lets the vulnerability in his eyes, the hesitation in his voice, and the soft moments with characters like Martha and Lois carry the weight of the myth. When he says he's conflicted about his place in the world, it feels believable because Cavill has already layered that tension into how he interacts with every frame. Even the larger-than-life action sequences don't overshadow that. When he punches through steel or stands toe-to-toe with Zod, there's a visible undercurrent of reluctance, as though every hit comes with an awareness of the consequences of his power. That nuance transforms Man of Steel from being just another superhero spectacle into something with a pulse. Cavill's Superman saves people because he's internalized the burden of choice. And Cavill plays that tension with such sincerity that you forget you're watching a performance. He makes the impossible figure of Superman not only believable, but deeply relatable. And I, along with many others, will never forgive Snyder for wrecking the Superman that's got the perfect actor attached to it. Contrast that with Batman vs. Superman, where Cavill takes the same Superman and leans harder into the mythic register. This isn't the hesitant outsider anymore. This is a god learning the consequences of being worshipped and despised in equal measure. Cavill modulates his performance so that Superman becomes less about what he says and more about what his presence alone communicates. In scenes where he barely speaks, Cavill's physical stillness radiates authority and melancholy. The performance works because Cavill understood that Superman doesn't need more speeches. He needs the gravity of a man carrying the weight of two worlds on his back. But just when you think Cavill is locked into stoic hero roles, he pivots to the man from U.N.C.L.E. Here, he channels pure old-school charm as Napoleon Solo. This role is all about cadence, wit, and style. Cavill's timing is razor-sharp, and his delivery has the exact dry humor that keeps the film buoyant. It's a performance built on verbal dexterity rather than brute force, showcasing that Cavill can play the kind of debonair spy usually reserved for actors like Cary Grant or Pierce Brosnan. He proves he can slip into a role that thrives on suaveness instead of intensity, and he makes it look effortless. In The Man from U.N.C.L.E., he takes on the role of Napoleon Solo, with a performance that recalls the golden age of spy cinema while still feeling fresh in his hands. What's striking about his performance is the precision with which he balances debonair charm and understated menace. Solo is a thief turned CIA operative, a man who wears refinement like armor, and Cavill leans into that duality with remarkable poise. His posture is immaculate, his delivery crisp, his every gesture calculated. He moves through the film like a man who owns every room he enters, yet Cavill ensures that Solo isn't reduced to caricature. There's a sly humor in his performance, especially in his sparring with Armie Hammer's Kuryakin, where Cavill's smooth, almost languid delivery contrasts sharply with his co-star's blunt intensity. That tension gives Solo layers. He's constantly navigating the line between self-preservation and reluctant camaraderie. At the same time, Cavill injects Solo with enough depth to keep him from being a hollow pastiche of 1960s spy archetypes. His flirtation is layered with hints of genuine intrigue and guarded vulnerability. In a film that thrives on style and wit, Cavill's Solo becomes its anchor because he knows exactly how to balance restraint with presence, irony with sincerity. This was a magnificent performance. Then there's a personal favorite of mine, Mission Impossible, Fallout, where Cavill essentially weaponizes his physicality against Tom Cruise. As August Walker, he's a blunt instrument of a man, arrogant, efficient, and ruthlessly pragmatic. Cavill uses his size and gravitas to create an aura of menace. I love watching the subtle disdain Cavill weaves into his interactions, a sense that he's always 5 steps ahead of everyone else in the room. The bathroom fight is the obvious showcase. He takes a character who could have been a stock heavy and turns him into one of the franchise's most memorable foils. Cavill flips everything people expect from him on its head, using the same physical presence that made him an inspiring Superman to make August Walker feel intimidating, unpredictable, and brutishly pragmatic. Almost said Britishly pragmatic for a second there. The bathroom fight sequence is the perfect showcase. Cavill reloads his arms like pistons, grounding the moment in raw, mechanical menace. Every punch he throws feels like it could end the fight, and the audience is reminded that Cavill embodies Action Man. His size, posture, and unshakable expression make him feel like a weapon pointed in whatever direction the CIA demands. This physicality, paired with his cold confidence, makes him the perfect foil to Cruise's wiry determination. Where Ethan thrives on adaptability, Walker thrives on brute force. But Cavill doesn't stop at being muscle. He layers Walker with an arrogance that sells his role as both ally and eventual betrayer. When he spars verbally with Hunt or needles him about his methods, Cavill delivers the lines with just enough bite to hint that Walker never truly respected Ethan. That restrained disdain, played with Cavill's calm delivery and sharp glances, brings a satisfying conclusion to a character who always saw himself as above the mission, above the team. And when the final act arrives, with Cavill's Walker revealed as the true antagonist, Cavill dials up the intensity. He doubles down on Walker's philosophy of brute dominance and conviction in his superiority. That's what makes the final helicopter chase so thrilling. It isn't merely stunt spectacle, it's Cavill embodying a man who genuinely believes he can crush Ethan Hunt through willpower and strength alone. His Walker is proof that his range extends beyond heroes into villains who command the screen with the same force. Switch gears to Enola Holmes, and Cavill once again reinvents himself, this time as Sherlock Holmes. What's fascinating is that Cavill's Sherlock is unlike any before him. Warmer, more emotionally accessible, yet still tethered to logic. Kind of like an older brother who slowly learns how to soften his edges. Cavill's choice to humanize Sherlock this way reveals a keen understanding of the character as well as his ability to reshape archetypes without breaking them. And then there's The Witcher. As Geralt of Rivia, Cavill delivers what might be his most nuanced balance between physical presence and restrained emotion. He crafts Geralt as a character defined by weariness and subtle humor. The famous hums and grunts are his way of compressing centuries of wisdom and trauma into a single sound. Beneath the monster-slaying exterior is a man grappling with loneliness, and Cavill lets that ache bleed through in the quietest moments. From the moment he steps on screen, Cavill becomes a vessel of contradictions. Brutal yet tender, cynical yet loyal, detached yet capable of deep affection. Cavill's sheer size and training make every fight sequence convincing, and his choreography flows with a mix of raw brutality and precision. Cavill excellently utilizes stillness. His controlled posture, narrowed eyes, and measured speech create a sense that Geralt is always weighing the burdens of the world on his shoulders, enduring it rather than embracing it. Even the famous guttural growl of his voice, which Cavill insisted on shaping himself, contributes to the performance. A deliberate choice to embody a man scarred by both literal mutations and emotional burdens. Cavill plays these quieter moments with tenderness, a glance, a softened voice, and they resonate because they feel earned. This is an actor who understands that Geralt's strength is in how reluctantly he allows himself to care in a world that punishes vulnerability. Even in moments where the show's narrative falters, Cavill's performance anchors the story. In embodying Geralt, Cavill not only proves his commitment, doing many of his own stunts, immersing himself in the lore, but he also redefines what it means to carry a franchise. By sheer force of performance, he transforms The Witcher into a role that only he could have played with this much conviction. In Night Hunter, Cavill goes dark, taking on a role that immerses him in the procedural grime of tracking a serial predator. Here, he discards all the polish and glamour, leaning into frustration, exhaustion, and moral ambiguity. It's not the kind of role that gets mainstream attention, but it demonstrates his ability to exist in darker, messier spaces. In Night Hunter, Cavill strips away the glamour entirely, presenting a hardened detective named Marshall, who feels more like a worn-down, blunt instrument, likely due to his line of work. It's a fascinating role because Cavill suppresses his natural charisma in favor of an almost uncomfortable rigidity. His Marshall is stoic, severe, and visibly scarred by years of field work, and Cavill commits fully to that weight. He lowers his energy, tightens his movements, and relies on terse delivery to show a man who has lost any illusions about justice being clean. In a film where morality is constantly blurred, Cavill plays Marshall as a figure teetering between persistence and exhaustion, embodying a cop who knows he's in too deep but refuses to step back. There's no grand flourish here, no wink of charm or theatricality, just raw, stripped-down intensity and inner conflict. And while the movie itself falters, Cavill's performance is definitely a highlight. He makes Marshall convincing not because the script provides layers, but because Cavill imposes those layers. You see the toll in his eyes, and the near-obsessive way he clamps onto the pursuit of justice. It's perhaps overlooked, but one that highlights Cavill's ability to downplay himself for the sake of serving the character rather than the spectacle. His turn in Sandcastle is another pivot. Cavill plays Captain Syverson, embodying the no-nonsense military archetype with a lived-in realism. Cavill proves he can convincingly inhabit the kind of role that demands discipline and authority while avoiding cliches. He plays Syverson with a sharp authority that cuts through the film's haze of uncertainty, grounding the chaos of its war-torn setting with his controlled presence. What's compelling is how he avoids slipping into the cliché of the hardened, cynical commander. He imbues Syverson with quiet pragmatism, the kind of man who's seen enough to understand both the futility and the necessity of his mission. His physicality, measured, deliberate, never wasteful, reinforces the impression of someone who knows survival is about discipline as much as force. Yet there's a wry edge to his delivery, an almost bone-dry humor that humanizes him and makes his authority feel earned rather than imposed. Even in limited screen time, Cavill manages to suggest a whole history behind the character, a soldier worn down by repetition but still sharp enough to keep his men moving forward. It's restrained, unshowy work, but that's what makes it resonate. Cavill resists the temptation to dominate the frame, and instead plays Syverson as a piece of the larger machinery, a cog aware of the machine's flaws but unwilling to step aside. Finally, there's Hellraiser, Hellworld, a film most people would like to forget, But here's where Cavill's career-long pattern is most obvious. Even in a campy horror outing, he gives the role more credibility than it probably deserves. He doesn't treat it as beneath him, he treats it as another exercise in finding truth, even within pulp. That early commitment to treating every role seriously explains why he's become so adept at navigating wildly different genres. What ties all these performances together is Cavill's refusal to be boxed in. He's a chameleon whose defining trait is the ability to recalibrate depending on what the role demands. When you step back and map the trajectory, you realize Cavill has done historical drama, mythological epics, modern blockbusters, spy thrillers, period pieces, fantasy adaptations, and even low-budget horror. And at every point, he's risen to the occasion. He's molded himself into characters with distinct emotional centers, proving that range is about knowing how to disappear into the world of the story. Henry Cavill has too much range for his own good. Because when an actor is this adaptable, people stop noticing the versatility and start taking it for granted. But look closely, and you'll see a performer who's built a career on constant reinvention. And if anything, his trajectory suggests that he's only just scratching the surface of what he can do.